But yeah, well, let's kick it off here for everyone joining. We're going to spend kind of the day here just chatting with Langers. There's a lot going on in Rocket Pool. I put a couple of notes together in an agenda here, but we've got plenty of time to explore all these things. But maybe if you can give everybody an update with Saturn. I know you had an announcement about a kind of a delayed anticipated launch, some findings, some very important findings from the audits. Tell us everything you want the community to know about Saturn 1.
Yeah, thanks. So at the moment, Saturn One is going through the audit process, as we've kind of like previously said. So Sigma Prime wrapped up a few weeks ago, and Cantina have been working through their audit, and then Balsec started quite a few weeks ago as well. Now, Cantina have wrapped up and provided their findings. We have almost finished. We're basically finished all of their findings now, but there's one outstanding, which is kind of Balsec found as well, and we're kind of wrapping that up in and kind of working through that. So Cantina finished. Balsec have I think it's 2 more weeks left until they're finished, and then they're kind of done, and we have to do. We've got like, I think after they finish, we've got a week or so, week to 2 weeks of fixed checks. So essentially going through their findings and fixing them, and then they come back to us with yes, that's fixed. Similar to what we're doing with Cantina right now. Cantina, all of the audit teams have been really good. Cantina and Balsec have been they're kind of like new to us, so it was kind of like a risk bringing a new auditor on board, and in this case two new auditors on board, but they've been exceptional. So we're very, very happy with what Cantina have been doing. We're very happy with Balsec as well. And what's actually quite nice about the whole process is that they've each kind of like approached it in a slightly different way. And so that's been amazing because it means we've got some really good coverage, and we've kind of got what's really good is we've got the breadth of coverage and some depth, and a lot of depth as well. So it's been an excellent process so far. They're definitely making the protocol more robust, and so we're just kind of trying to get through those findings. But out of that, so in terms of how that affects the timing, so I was kind of, I guess, hoping that we would be able to do like a smaller I suspected that we would have to do like a DevNet 5, but I expected it to be quite a small DevNet 5, and that kind of like just wrapped up the findings from the audits. Unfortunately, some of the findings they've given does have some significant enough changes that we need a proper DevNet cycle to make sure that we're testing it. And then, unfortunately, because of just timing, that ended up pushing us out to DevConnect, which then delays us again, which then hits Christmas. And so that's why we've kind of had to move it to basically January. But what that does, the positive thing around that is it gives us time to get these fix checks done. It gives us time to obviously evaluate those fixes in DevNet 5 and make sure that that's all working really well. And then we can be ready in the new year for the release in kind of early January. That's kind of like the audit and development process. In terms of like testnets, so this week, it's last week actually, we pushed out DevNet 4. So DevNet 4 has been around for a little while, but what's actually been happening is we had it on Houston code, and we've allowed kind of like node operators and beta testers to come in and create mini pools essentially. So they've gone in, created loads of mini pools, and so that what we can do is we can kind of like test that migration process from mini pools to mega pools. It gets node operators familiar with the process, and also there's some extra testing that we can do around that as well. So that the Houston code, it was Houston code, now it's Saturn code. We've deployed Saturn code to DevNet 4, and so now we can kind of like go through and do that testing. So definitely, if you've got validators on DevNet 4, then go ahead, familiarize yourself with the Saturn features and migrate your mini pools and do anything you want, basically try and break it. Definitely give us feedback in the DevNet thread. In terms of like other DevNets, as I said, we'll need a DevNet 5. We'll do that once BALSEC have finished their audits and we've done the fix checks. So essentially that will be kind of like the final or near final code, excluding any sort of small bug fixes that we find during the testing of DevNet 5. I'll stop there because I've been talking for quite a while. I'm sure you've got questions, Ken.
Yeah. No, it's all very good information. So let me back to the audits just for a second here. Lots of questions, but if I recall correctly, there's a third audit team that is a little bit delayed behind these other two. Is that correct?
There was Sigma, who was the first one.
Oh, they were ahead. They were ahead of the other two. Okay.
Yeah, and they've already finished.
Okay.
So they finished a few weeks ago.
Okay, and then what's the plan then to release? I know as part of the strategy is you don't release the audit reports initially because you want each team to kind of independently approach the problem, right, and not kind of share answers from each other. But now that they've each finished their audits, what's the plan for releasing those audits to the community so we can kind of see their findings and understand the corrections and so forth?
Yeah, technically Cantina is still auditing because we're still doing the fix checks, and BALSEC have a couple of weeks left. But once they're completed and because we can't really release the reports until all of the fix checks are done as well, because they have to essentially mark that we've done it. We could drip out the audit reports, but I think it's probably better that we just do it all in one announcement. So once BALSEC have finished and we've completed our fix checks, and they've given us their final report, then we'll just release the 3 reports all in one go. What we'll probably do on pretty much the same day as what we usually do on the same day is flip over the assets. So in Immunify, at the moment, Immunify, our bug bounty program, is pointing at the current
Houston,
the code, the Houston code, and so at that point, once we release those reports, we'll also flip over the bug bounty program to point to Saturn, and we want to do that as early as possible because another advantage of kind of like pushing it out slightly is that we do get a bit more time in terms of having that available to bug bounty hunters and that sort of stuff. So so that's what we'll do on that day as well. So we'll release the 3 audit reports and flip over the bug bounty, and that will be kind of like one audit and one security kind of like announcement.
Okay, yeah, perfect. And then so then you're thinking, okay, kind of around that same time, there'll be one more, dress rehearsal, DevNet 5, right? And then what happens after that? Eventually, the hoodie, just itself outside of the DevNet has to be upgraded. When do you see that happening in the timeline?
So we'll do some testing on DevNet 5 for like a few weeks, and then once we're confident with DevNet 5, we will essentially upgrade the testnet, and then that will go into Saturn, obviously. There'll be we've got a bit of time to do some testing on testnet, but the bulk of the testing will have been done by then. The main reason to upgrade testnet is just to again practice. It's more actually for us to do a dress rehearsal of the release process, and so that's what the testnet release will be. It will be like a dress rehearsal of the deployment, and we'll go through pretty much exactly the same sort of thing in terms of comms and the structure of the release as we would do on mainnet. So that's the idea with testnet.
Okay. Okay. And then I saw maybe it has no relationship to it, but just to kind of ask the question, I did see that the core devs have kind of announced some plans for Fusaka, the hard fork of Ethereum, and I guess that's going to happen right after DevConnect, perhaps early December. Does that have any impact to the timing, or is it just kind of a side event for us?
It doesn't affect the timing. It is something we're paying attention to, and we have been for the last couple of weeks. We've been assessing. We've assessed the RPIPs, and there's not really anything that stands out for us in terms of we don't see any.
The EIPs, right?
Sorry, the
Yeah,
EIPs.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the EIPs. Yeah, in terms of the EIPs, we're not really seeing anything that's too major out of that. We will need to do like a little bit of testing on the test net, but to be honest, we'd probably be doing that testing anyway because of the test net release and that sort of stuff. So I think that's going to be fine. We can basically do that at the same time. Yeah, we would. It's more just a sanity check to make sure that nothing's broken. But from looking at the EIPs, there's nothing that should break it. So we're pretty comfortable.
Okay, okay. And then let's continue on here. There was a proposal that had been batted around and debated a bit in the community here. It's got an official name. This one, RPIP, Rocket Pool Improvement Protocol number 74. And this is one I think proposed by Dr. D, or at least he was the one that authored the RPIP. And this is one that is currently in sediment poll about closing the mini pool queue closure. Yeah, and I wonder if you could just take a little bit of time. I think the sentiment is still to go forward with it. I know lots in the community were chatting about should we delay the vote, or how should we vote, or maybe the vote is just tied to turn ons, some period of time before the closure. But could you just remind us again, kind of the queues, right? There's multiple queues. An express queue, a regular queue, the old mini pool queue. There's also a couple other queues on the Ethereum side, the entry queue, the exit queue, the sweep queue. Could you maybe just explain this a little bit to us, and then if the team has any thoughts on whether we should close the queue. I don't know if I've ever asked you to opine on that, but it looks like the settlement poll is to bring it to a vote. But maybe give us some educational background so when this comes forward, people understand what it is we're talking about with all these queues.
There are far too many queues. So yeah, let's start from the beginning then. So mini pools, right? So Rocket Pool today has mini pools, and when you, as a node operator, when you deposit, if there's no rETH kind of like in the deposit pool to fill your so to kind of like match with your validator, you go into a queue waiting for that ETH to come in, right? And so let's call that the mini pool queue. So the mini pool queue at the moment, I believe is about like 100 mini pools in the mini pool queue, and so yeah, that's ETH waiting to be matched with rETH to then be staked within the Rocket Pool protocol. So okay, so then I'll kind of like outline the beacon chain part a little bit as well. So, but then once Once it goes through the rocket pool queue system, then it enters the beacon chain queue, which again is just that's more along the lines of kind of activation timing. So there's a bit of a queue, an activation queue, in the sense that your validator has deposited, and it's got like the right amount and all that sort of thing. It's just it takes a little while for your validator to actually activate because of the way that the beacon chain works and the way it onboards new validators. So it's kind of like a bit of an entry queue there. Okay, so then that's the current situation. That's the current state. Then you've got Saturn. So with Saturn, we introduced two new queues, right? So there's the express queue and the standard queue. And this is kind of additional to it's additional to the mini pool initially. So what happens is when we deploy Saturn, obviously these two new queues get created, but we have to deal with the mini pool queue first. So the mini pool queue, we have to kind of like go through the mini pool queue and clear out that first before we can then start to process the mega pool queues. So with the mega pool queues, there's the express queue and standard queue. The express queue is used for the idea behind the express queue is to essentially help current mini pool node operators migrate to Saturn. So what happens is, as a node operator today with mini pools, you get a certain number of express tickets, and that means that you can use this express queue. The express queue kind of moves twice as fast as the standard queue. That's the difference between the two, but also it gets processed first. Or well, actually, it just means it moves first. Actually, it moves. It moves twice as fast as the standard queue. That's essentially how it works. So, when we actually release Saturn, there'll be the mini pool queue first. And so as ETH comes in for rETH, it'll get matched with the mini pool queue first. Once the mini pool queue is empty, so creating mini pools will be disabled. So no new mini pools will be able to be created, but we have to then just process that queue. Once that queue is done, there'll be no more mini pool queue, essentially, because you won't be able to deposit into the mini pool queue. Then we'll start processing the express queue and standard queue for Saturn. Hopefully that's I've taken you through that, but please answer. I know you.
Yeah, I guess one question you'll have to remind us of is, okay, so irregardless of the settlement poll or the actual vote, when it comes to it, it does appear. I mean, maybe I should go look at the sentiment poll again, but it did look like there was more people in favor of doing it. I guess there's some pros and cons that you kind of have to think through, but irregardless, right? Once Saturn 1 is turned on, mini pools won't exist anymore, right? There is no way in a post Saturn 1 upgrade to create a mini pool. It's all mega pools. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. So in
The
some
other
ways, that mini pool queue will go away. Either we turn it off ahead of Saturn 1 launch, and we try to time it so that it will just the natural growth of rocket pool or the demand for rETH will consume the mini pools. I suppose in a perfect launch, it would, they would consume them right up until launch, or even allow the deposit pool to build up some capacity on launch day, right? And that might be ideal, and build that capacity up quickly so it's not left unstaking and unyield earning for the rETH holders. But irregardless, if we launch Saturn 1, the mini pool queue is basically quote unquote turned off anyhow, right? It will have to process those mini pools first, as they've got precedent priority, but no one could create new mini pools post Saturn 1. So the queue is basically shut off anyhow, right?
That's correct. Yeah. The other dynamic that's worth communicating is that when you deposit into the mini pool queue, there's no way of exiting the mini pool queue. So you deposit into the mini pool queue, and the only outcome is that you end up staking, right?
Yeah.
There's no exit mechanism for exiting the queue. That's different to Saturn. Saturn does have you can queue up your deposit, and then you can exit later on if it's taken too long, or you decide you don't want to stake anymore. Right up until you do actually stake. So once you've staked, you can't exit, obviously, but there is an exit mechanism for the queue. But with mini pools, you can't. So that's another reason why we have to kind of like process that queue and make sure that they're all done.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that, I've kind of waffled back and forth on this and personally how I'll vote. But I think that's one of the things that does encourage me voting for it is that is kind of the leap of faith, right? You have to have trust in the protocol that once in the mini pool queue, there'll be enough continual demand to exit the mini pool. Like you said, I mean, there's periods of time when you're first staking, you have to meet a minimum commitment of so many days on the beacon chain before you can initiate a beacon chain with withdraw and exit. But eventually you'll just time out and you'll be able to do that. So it seemed like, I mean, staking, especially node operating, should always be a long-term commitment. But there was always an exit strategy if the worst ever happened, or your life circumstances change and you need to do something else. You were not in a long-term relationship, and there was always a pathway out, except for maybe that mini poll queue, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Um, and then remind me, there was a little bit of discussions about the mini pool contracts, right? And I guess right now we have mini pool contracts right now that don't have forced exit. So if a node operator, abandons their node or has underperformance issues, there's no way that the protocol or the PDAO could initiate a forced exit. All we rely upon is the beacon chain minimum balance requirements to exit the validator, right? Um, but what happens now in Saturn One? Is there a way, or is the contract upgradable in megapools to allow for future development of what we've been calling forced exits, or the protocol to set some minimum performance criteria higher than the beacon chain, and to remove underperforming node operators? How does that work? There seem to be a lot of questions and discussions about that, and what's the correct answers on those?
Right. So with Saturn One, it basically just lays the groundwork, but it doesn't actually implement that straight away. So um, what um, so what we have at the moment is uh, delegate upgrades. So at the moment with mini pools, you have a mini pool delegate, which is kind of like the code that runs in your mini pool. And at the moment, we have kind of opt-in upgrades, and we made that decision for a reason, and that's to kind of like give node operators control over when they upgrade and that sort of thing. But the issue there is that we can't really make protocol-wide decisions based on that. So one of the things that Saturn introduced is kind of like a mandatory upgrade. What we still have like the flexibility for node operators in the sense that there's like a period in which there's like a period in which you don't have to upgrade, but then after a certain point in time, you then have to upgrade. Now, obviously, if you don't like the incoming changes as a node operator, then you can exit and do that. So that's to give you that window of opportunity to go, look, I don't like those incoming changes, and so I'm going to exit. But what that kind of like mandatory upgrade thing does is it means that we can introduce things like this later on. So, so one of the things that it's kind of, there's a couple of things being scoped out. So in Saturn 2 already, there is provision for within megapools. There's this kind of concept of debt. It's kind of not really debt, but anyway, it's kind of like a debt. And if you and that's more around like penalties. And if you have this debt at a certain kind of like threshold, it means that you can be exited. So that's kind of like already provisioned for Saturn 2, but there is talk of like a provision where we can provide a state proof of your balance. So if you slipped under 32 ETH, you're under a certain line of 32 ETH. So maybe let's say 31 ETH, then you can be permissionlessly exited because you're underperforming. So that's kind of being worked on at the moment. But Saturn lays the groundwork because it means that these things can be introduced later, whereas with the current mini pool system, it can't be.
Yeah, got it. Okay, and then let's go back. Lots of questions coming in here. Let's go back just for a second to the mini pool contract, right? So as we were in kind of Houston here, right? Originally, we've gone through a lot of iterations in the various mini pool delegates here, right? We had one in the beginning that was based upon demand, and then demands kind of changed. We were node operator rich and rETH limited, and then vice versa. And so some people might have variable interest rates or rates that range from 5% to 20%. And then I think some point in our lifespan here, we fixed it at 14%. And then just recently, it's at 5%, I guess, for ETH earnings. And then, it makes up some fraction of that out of smoothing pool rewards, right, to increase that. But what happens to mini pools? Like if I'm a node operator and I'm trying to decide what is the best plan forward, do I wait for Saturn 1? Do I go kind of in the feeding frenzy that happens on the day of and convert? Do I wait it out and keep some mini pools? How do I figure out what my mini pool node commission is and which ones are the later ones that are dependent upon the rewards tree to generate the full yield, right? Didn't we have a financial incentive that reduced late mini pools that still hang on after the Saturn one? And can you remind us what happens then?
Right. Okay. So there's going to be kind of like two groups of people, really. There's going to be mini pool owners that are kind of pre-Saturn 0. In other words, they staked RPL with their deposits, and then you've got people who deposited it after with Saturn 0, and a few of those are kind of ETH only. So you've got ETH only mini pools and kind of like RPL mini pools. So because it's a little bit more complicated, well, it's that complicated because I have to kind of like explain those two cases. But let's say for example you're a pre-Saturn 0 mini pool. So with Saturn 0, there is a couple of reasons for you to kind of like migrate. First of all, as it stands from a commission perspective, because we're actually there's two things. So first of all, so currently your bond is 8 ETH per validator, and with Saturn that would actually be 4 ETH. So first of all, you'll kind of like double the amount of validators that you'll be able to spin up. And obviously, the more validators, the more execution rewards. So that kind of like works out. And more chances of larger blocks and all that sort of stuff. Then you've got the fact that we're moving from 8 ETH to 4 ETH, which increases the kind of like capital efficiency. And so as it stands at the moment, you'll actually earn more. Even if you're kind of, I think it's like even if you're earning you've got like a 20% mini pool, I think you're still earning more with Saturn 1. the other factor is that, particularly with that group, because you've got you're staking RPL as well. You'll actually, if you stake RPL within your mega pool, you'll then get the kind of the voter share. So this is the kind of like everyone's colloquially calling it the fee switch, where if you're staking RPL in mega pools, then you basically get a share of revenue from the protocol. So a certain percentage of the commission from rETH holders that actually goes into a pot, and then every 28 days with the reward tree, that gets distributed between the RPL staking node operators. So that's a key incentive for those guys. So that's on the RPL staking node. I say kind of classic mini pool. And then with Saturn Zero and the ETH only mini pools, so they currently have a base commission of 5%. So they have a base commission of 5%, but the Saturn Zero reward tree gives them essentially another 5% on top of that to make kind of like 10% commission. If they're then staking RPL, then it goes up to 14%, I think. So the with that group, the Saturn Zero structure with the additional 5% goes away, right? So their base commission will stay at 5%. So they actually have quite an incentive to kind of like move over, because they will then get a better kind of I think you don't get a better commission, but you get a more ETH actually. But you essentially you earn more. So that's so that there's a big incentive for Saturn Zero ETH only mini pools to migrate over to Saturn. And again, if they want to stake RPL, which RPL is an optional collateral, but if they want to stake RPL, then that boosts their income, because you can essentially increase the amount of ETH that you get from the protocol as income. So yeah, they're the two parties. I'll pause there because I'm sure you've got some questions.
Yeah. More questions than we might even have time for today. But and let me just see if I get this right, because it's been kind of a long journey to this point, and I think myself and maybe some of our listeners could use a refresher here. So the voter share that you talked about, the fee switch for node operators post Saturn One that are running mega pools. That will go live with Saturn One, right? There's another one that we're supposed to vote on ahead of Saturn One that doesn't go live with Saturn One, even though we vote ahead of it, which is an RPL. I don't want to say dividend or reward share or value capture to RPL, right? Those are two separate things: voter share and RPL value capture. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one rewards RPL staking node operators, and one kind of rewards all RPL holders. Is kind of the split.
Okay. And then maybe that's a good segue back to kind of the voting here, right? So, if we back up just for a second about the settlement poll and RPIP 74 for the snapshot vote, right? I mean, originally, the community and the PDAO, we were kind of pushing with the pre-November launch and going, oh boy, we got to either get this thing up and out to vote if we're going to have any time to affect that queue. And I think we all kind of breathed a little bit of a sigh of relief with the slight delay in the audit findings. But so what is the team's thought? Do you see any reason why we should delay the snapshot vote? I think some in the community were thinking, well, we've got it all lined up. Let's vote, even if it has a delayed implement, right? You don't want to shut the queue off too much ahead of it, because you have the potential to have unstaked ETH that could negatively affect the overall yield for our ETH holders, right? So we want to time it correctly, right? Where we shut it off in enough time to clear the queue, build up a little bit of supply, but not have that supply build for an unreasonably long period of time, right? It's a little bit of a perfect timing type thing. But any reason that we should delay that vote, or should we vote now? Like, what's your opinion? What's the team's thought on this?
Yeah, in terms of RPIP 74, um, if I'm completely honest, I'm kind of easy either way. I I can definitely see both sides of the argument. I don't like the idea of a long shutdown process. So we need to make, yeah, as you said, the timing kind of has to be quite right. But it would be good to kind of like have a less of a mini pool queue so that we can um, start going through. I think it'd be better if we can, the sooner we can start getting people over into mega pools. Mega pools should be the priority from now on. So I think I think we should get the vote done and see where that goes, and then and then try and lock in the date. I think just agreeing on that, the fact that we are going to close it, and then we can figure out what the kind of like timing is. I need to go through and read the RPIP properly, but I have to see how that works. But I think it is a good idea to close the mini pool queue, as you said. Not as is said in the sentiment poll. Comms is going to be very, very important, because obviously we don't want too much of a backlash in terms of that we've closed the mini pool deposits. But, we want to make sure that everyone is communicated as to why we're doing this, and have like a strong driver for it. But yeah, that's I think it is. I think it is a good idea.
Yeah. And I've seen Dr. D is saying that the RPIP calls for, I guess, 2 weeks before the launch, right? And remind me, this is something the Security Council controls, right? It's a protocol setting. So, worst case, if we mistime it and the demand, causes, we see very large deposits, maybe from these DATs or whatever. Is it fairly nimble that the Security Council, if there was some parameters in it, like, if the ETH deposit pool reaches like 80% or whatever, they could turn it on just briefly to clear it out? Or, like, I mean, it's not like, boy, once we do it, it's a one-time setting. We can't adjust if market conditions demand otherwise, right?
Yeah, I mean that from a technical perspective, it's really flexible, because, as you said, it's controlled by the Security Council. From a governance perspective, that's probably the but from a governance perspective, that's probably the harder part. It's just making sure that the DAO give the instruction to the Security Council, because the Security Council are there to obviously respond to security threats, not necessarily for this sort of thing, which is much more of like a release strategy process. So it's just making sure that the DAO gives the Security Council the authority to do this as part of that, and that's all been I think taken care of with Dr. D has been working with the community on that. So I'm pretty sure that that's covered in the RPIP in terms of if as you said, if the deposit pool gets to a certain point, then we can re-enable the queue.
Okay. And then let's just talk a little bit about the RPL value capture, right? Because I do recall one of the other RPIPs has said, hey, prior to Saturn 1, we need to we need to have a kind of a decision on how we're going to do that value capture, just so we can signal to RPL holders how best to how best they're going to be returned or rewarded in their efforts here. Where do you see the timing of that? I know that a couple in the community, maybe it's Scuzzle, maybe it's some other ones that have been working on this. I apologize if I'm missing folks here, but I know there was a team that was starting to relook at maybe the tokenomics of this, right? They did a lot of work in the early tokenomics, and I think this was one of the remaining deliverables in the tokenomics work. But any thoughts about that yet? Are you tracking that, and when in the new timing should that vote occur?
Yeah, maybe we just call them the usual suspects, which I mean that in a in a adoring
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Adoring way isn't sort of the right word, but in a positive aspect. So um, so
yeah,
in terms of that vote, I think that's important. Um, there's a few things. So I put up the roadmap discussion a little while ago on the DAO forum, and from our perspective, uh, at the moment, the roadmap is a bit unclear, right? So originally, what's very clear is that the DAO have approved Saturn 1 and Saturn 2. But even part of Saturn 2, which is this RPL value capture, is a bit uncertain because because we need a vote to clarify which one we need to choose, which value capture mechanism, or whether to have a value capture mechanism in the first place. So that's the first thing. But then there's also the fact that there's been kind of like a bit of a priority shift in sentiment within the community around um, uh, trying to prioritize some rETH updates. So the first one of those is the kind of redemption process, like a redemption process for rETH holders, and also this state proof thing that I mentioned before in terms of being able to kick kind of like extreme underperforming nodes. So those two, that, and again that kind of is under the rETH update because it's kind of more like giving rETH protection, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, yeah.
one gives them kind of really flexible withdrawal liquidity, and one gives them a protection for extreme underperforming nodes. So so those two things have kind of like popped themselves up as kind of priorities. So I think there's been some work around defining those and trying to get those prioritized. So from our perspective, that's very, very key for us because we need to know what we should be working on next. There's so we can start on some of the Saturn 2 stuff. Should we start on the rETH updates? At the moment, it does seem like from the roadmap discussion that we should be prioritizing the rETH updates, but we haven't necessarily got a vote to tell us that, if you know what I mean. So, so yeah, voting around whether to include the rETH updates before kind of some of the Saturn 2. Well, basically, what does the sequence of launches look like? That's what we need to clarify. And so that's kind of like partly what I've said in that roadmap thing. But yeah, if we can lock that down in governance, that would be fantastic. And I mean, part of that is the value capture stuff, but
Yeah.
um, we again, knowing which order of governance. I think there's
Yeah.
probably people that know it even better than I do, but I think we have to vote on the RPL value capture thing because we've said we would before Saturn 1 launch, and I think that is still a key timing that we should do. But I do think we also need to vote on putting the rETH updates in and making sure that the team have that kind of clear guidance from the DAO to say, yes, please do the rETH updates.
Yeah, no, I mean, and thank you. You're tying this in really nice because I mean, those are the important things, right? Like, okay, so we said we would do something on the RPL value capture, right? And we do have some kind of responsibility to return value to RPL holders, right? And so there's that pressure. But then, ultimately, what is the product that Rocket Pool produces? It produces the rETH liquid staking token, right? And we need, stronger assurances to rETH holders that that there's a way to force exit the nodes for underperformance. There's a way to force exit the nodes when redemption events occur, right? So that way the value of the rETH token will trade more closer to its NAV value, right? It's protocol derived ETH value, right? And so by being able to force exit in some fair way, randomly or first in, first out, or whatever it is, um, method to, provide liquidity and redemption value, right? I think those are all good. And then of course, I mean, I wish I could post a GIF that says, why not both or why not all three, right? But I know that the team is limited in capacity, right? And we kind of have to have a priority order in those. And I don't know, but in terms of, in your wish list here, your Santa Claus wish list, like when would you like to see that the PDAO and the community vote on the priorities of that? Is that something you want to see in November or December? Like when do you need that to start doing your next step? I know you're focusing on wrapping up Saturn One, but eventually your GM ship here is probably going to start focusing on Saturn Two. Like when do you need a decision by the community to set that priority?
So at the moment, I'm looking at November as like kind of like the kickoff for us to look at the next release. So I mean, we're doing a little bit in the background, but to be honest, like the audits at the moment are soaking up all of our capacity. So
Yeah,
there's not, realistically, we're not doing
yeah,
anything. And then it's going to be testing and bug
yeah.
fixing and all that sort of stuff. So November is when we're going to start looking at the next release. And so that it would be fantastic to have some guidance by kind of like November, like early November or mid November or something like that, so that we can actually, so we can move forward, with purpose.
And then there's another question in training or in trading. Are you so I agree that there's not, like, it seems everybody's got a different take. I don't know if the community is like even batted around with enough consensus, other than I'm sure we all agree all three of those are very important, right? That we're in a trilemma situation here. But are you planning on the team to write an RPIP? Like when are you going to bring an RPIP forward for us to vote on?
So I mean that's a great question. I I was thinking, so I in the discussions I've been having on like the DAO forum, um, we're trying to figure out where that sits. I believe that there's going to be some GMC stuff around funding some research on lighting up some of the RPIP. I mean, to be honest, if we get kind of like close to November and we've got kind of like a governance take to say, well, yeah, at the moment I'm kind of waiting for the community to give me an RPIP, but if that doesn't happen, then we will kind of like either help out or kind of do the RPIP ourselves in November. So yeah, I mean either way, like it'll get done. But I do think I want the community involved. I think the community want to be involved as well. So that's good. So yeah, I mean it's definitely going to be a bit of a to and fro, but like we need Kane to be involved in that process as well. But yeah, either way it'll get done. We can work with the community on an RPIP, or we can like kick off that process. We will still work with the community on that. Like, it's not something we're not going to go away and just do it by ourselves, but we help draft it. So either way, we'll get an RPIP done.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that could be very helpful, or at least signal to the community which side you want it on. But yeah, no, and I certainly invite any any listeners or anybody that's listening to this on replay. If if you can actually see a logical order to these things and have an argument as to why to do one before the other, please share it. Right? I think the conversations I've seen on this have just agreed they're all important, but no one really had a good a good reason as to why to do it in a certain sequence or order. So yeah, I'd be very much interested in that. And then let me just check with you because I know we've been talking for a while here. How are you doing on time? I do want to ask you a few more questions about the RE side of the house. We've focused on the node operator, but do you have a hard stop coming up?
No, no. Let me just triple check. But no, I'm all good. I'm all good.
Okay. Okay, let me keep going here. I'm still keeping an eye on trading for other questions here. Been a really great session so far. So let's talk a little bit about our product, right? Our ETH and so forth. And it does seem like we've been on a little bit of a tear. It's been a lot of fun hosting these calls with special guests. There's been strong interest by these digital asset treasuries that are selecting our ETH as one of their holdings or maybe one of their prime holdings, and how to put the ETH that they accumulate to work and develop a yield strategy here. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that and kind of how the business development side is going and kind of where you see that go and what other future integrations we might be looking forward to here in the days and weeks ahead?
Yeah. So, we've got some decent traction with some digital asset firms. So, I think kind of BTCS was kind of like the first one where they're mainly operating on the node operator side at the moment, but they're definitely looking at rETH as well. So we're working with them a little bit to um, kind of bring them over to that side as well. As you kind of had the pleasure of chatting with ETH strategy as well the other day, they're looking at incorporating it into their kind of treasury process. We are reaching like the other side of it, the business development side in terms of the other treasury departments, the other treasury companies is a bit slower, but we're establishing those contacts, having the initial conversations with them. So people like Sharp, Link Gaming, and that sort of thing. That we're kind of in initial contacts with those people. So there's a few different contacts that we're running down and having the initial conversations with. So there, in terms of the digital asset thing, yes, we are getting some decent traction. I think that's mainly because we're an established player in the space, so it's quite natural for them to kind of like stake with us. But yeah, we're kind of like trying to handhold them a little bit, give them everything they need, and bring them into the ecosystem.
Yeah, and then it's funny we've always kind of talking about support for the team and on the technical side, but do you see kind of the interest and the demand growing? Is Grant feeling overwhelmed, or how are we doing on kind of the availability and support to reach out to these other protocols and develop those integrations or the relationships?
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty good. I mean, to be fair, so Grant's to-do list is getting bigger and bigger by the day. He's kind of like the top of the funnel. There's quite a lot of top of funnel sort of stuff, but no, he's kind of like working through that, and that's pretty good. There's a few different areas that we're trying to tackle actually. So obviously there's the digital asset. There's the digital asset treasury companies. There's also kind of like custodians, which we've kicked off as well. These are basically the companies that hold the digital assets for large institutions like ETFs and that sort of thing. So we've kind of like kicked off that foray as well. So and with the ETFs themselves and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely a long list of contacts that we're running down in the top of the funnel. Grant is doing pretty well. I've been doing a little bit as well, and actually, like Jasper's really helped in some of this as well. You know, just being out there in market and talking to people, he's thrown a few people our way. So as kind of like a contact person, he's been pretty good. Signal's been really good, not necessarily in that kind of like ETF space, but in kind of like other areas in terms of other protocols and other ecosystem stuff. You know, Signal, who kind of manages the Star initiative, has been working really well, kind of on some different leads and that sort of thing. So yeah, no, I think it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, glad to hear that, and glad to see the integrations. I know you guys have been working on the web page a little bit, and I want to ask you about the new front end and the cow swap. But one of the things I was thinking that we probably need on the web page is another menu button. It says something like institutional support or TradFi support for integrations with Rocket Pool. Right? I wonder how many people that are looking for some type of yeah, LST to have in their treasury or to have as part of their asset strategy. That maybe we need a traditional looking web page with who to contact and how to get in touch, and what type of integrations we could build and so forth there. But
Yeah. So,
but tell me a little bit
so
about the web page and some of the work coming.
yeah. So actually, you say that. So that is actually in the works in terms of like the institutional page and like a section on the website for institution to kind of like funnel institutions into our BD process. The reason why it's kind of like not on the website at the moment is we're kind of like dialing the content for that. But some of that is so under the hood, we want to have like we want to have a handling process for that in place before we put it on the website. So one of the things we're doing is we're working with Sleety on a pitch deck for institutions. So Grant and I have been working through that last week and this week in terms of coming up with the content for that pitch deck, and then or at least the outline and some of the content for that pitch deck, and then Sleety is going to put together essentially a polished a pitch deck for institutions, so that basically what happens is when they go through that process of going through the website and they come to us, we've got kind of like a process that we can follow to onboard them. So that is sending out the pitch deck, talking to them, initial conversation with them, understanding what their needs and all that sort of thing. So that's what we're developing with Grant at the moment. That's kind of a large part of what he's working on at the moment.
Oh, that's excellent to hear. Yeah. I'll ask you. Well, maybe I should ask that now. Do you think you'll have that in place ahead of the Dev Connect and kind of the big conferences where there's a lot of shop talk and trade talk done in the little side events?
Yeah, so from a timeline perspective, that looks doable. That we'll have it before Dev Connect, so that should be fine.
Okay. And then you want to talk a little bit about the integration with CalSwap on the site. Maybe explain what that is and how it benefits rETH holders or future rETH holders that are looking to swap into rETH.
Yeah. So this has been kind of quite a long awaited kind of request from the community. So the reason why it's kind of taken so long is to try to figure out the right way of doing it. Initially, we integrated CalSwap using their widget, and we kind of had it as a separate site to kind of play around with it. But it wasn't quite right. Just from a flow perspective, it wasn't quite right, and also we were kind of a bit unsure about wholesale turning off primary deposits. Because there was some feedback that people may still want to do primary deposits, even though secondary could be more advantageous for them, and that's more around like tax treatment and that sort of stuff. So we're trying to balance out how to kind of like do it, and obviously with different priorities moving around, it took us a little while to kind of like get to the point where we could get the priority done, but also do it in the right way. And a big kudos to Nick for doing the integration. It's gone. It's gone really well. It looks amazing now, and I think it does exactly what we need it to do. So with the website integration with CowSwap, so the idea behind that is we show both options in terms of the primary and the secondary market options, and we give them a recommendation on which to choose. So, for example, at the moment there is a discount on rETH on the secondary market. So it says there's a discount on the secondary market, so that you should use the secondary market to get rETH. And that should work really well because that's optimizing it for the user. They still have the choice to do the primary mechanism if they want to, but they can use a secondary and when there's a discount. Obviously, when there's a premium, the protocol way. So it kind of like works either way. I mean, what's good about this approach? There's a couple of things that's good about this approach. Obviously, using CowSwap means you get all the benefits of CowSwap. So you get the optimized routing. You also get like the MEV protection as well. So you get those elements, and the fact that you are contributing to bringing the peg to NAV. So they're the reasons why we kind of wanted to do it. It's just we had to kind of figure out the best way of doing it and then implement it, which wasn't trivial, but Nick's done a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots going on in this space. Well, let me get to my last and final topic here, which is the upcoming plans for DevConnect. Right, for those not familiar, DevConnect is one of the Ethereum Foundation's officially hosted conferences, and DevConnect is not really one big conference. It's just they pick a town and a place, Buenos Aires, the second week of November, and then all the other protocols and all the other Ethereum folks go there. I guess this year they're doing something unique. They're hosting a 1-day World's Fair that's going to be at the main venue, and then I know there's a lot of staking conferences that are either right before or right afterwards. Do you want to just share anything about the team going there, and if you have you guys applied for, or do you know if you'll be part of that Ethereum World's Fair? Will there be a demo or a booth for Rocket Pool? Tell us what you know, and if there's going to be a community meetup.
If I am completely honest, that's in Mav's hands, and I need to reach out and get more acquainted with the plans. I have been like heads down with all this other stuff, so I haven't actually kind of like figured out what we're doing for DevConnect. But I know there are plans, and I know Mav's across it and everything. So we are all good. But unfortunately I don't have much information on what we're doing for DevConnect. But the team will be there. We're actually kind of like exploring how it's whether all of us will be there or not. That is even we are locking that down basically like in the next 2 days, because there's a few things. There was a few things up in the air, but once that's all kind of like sorted out, we should have a better idea. But yeah, I will follow up with Mav and figure out what the exact plans are for that.
Yeah, we probably still have some time. I think everybody's focus is on, Korean Blockchain Week and token and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of odd this close. I mean, we're less than 60 days away. There's normally just a ton of side events and things go on, but it's been really quiet on crypto Twitter on this thing. I think everybody's kind of preoccupied, but I know everybody's looking forward to it, so it would be good. And yeah, I don't know what that Ethereum World's Fair is. I don't know. I would think we're consumer enough facing with our LST product, but maybe they wanted more use cases than just staking Ether and so forth. And yeah, there's both conferences. I saw that Mav and the staking rewards folks. Nicely give home stakers like Rocket Pool node operators as a very substantial discount to their conference, and the e-stakers just put their tickets up. They're very very reasonable, and they're for the day after. So if anyone's listening to this and considering going to it, I highly recommend it. It's always any of the EF endorsed ones are always very high quality signal to noise ratio. And in trading, there's actually, or excuse me, in the conferences channel, there's a thread in there if you look that's just specific, and a lot of community members are just posting stuff. But yeah, so far we haven't really seen a lot of the side events. I think probably as we get into October, we'll just see just a complete frenzy of those being posted there. But I know I'm looking for it. I'll be there. Unfortunately, I won't be in Buenos Aires until right at the beginning of it. I'll miss the a lot of people get there months or weeks ahead, and there's a lot of pre-events. But my travels are such I'm only going to be there during the actual week of it. So I'm looking forward to that. But Langer, is anything that we haven't covered yet? I know we've covered quite a bit, but anything that we haven't covered that you feel is important for the community to know?
No, I think we've covered a lot. So yeah, no, I think that's good. Are you still there, Ken?
I am. I'm just talking with mute on. I was going to say, yeah, I was going to say that, yeah, I think we've covered most of it. I've kept up in trading here. I don't think there's any questions that came up that we haven't answered. And I know Mav is planning perhaps for a second community call this week with some special guests that are coming in, a couple of exciting ones coming up that I think he's trying to line up dates and times for it, but nothing yet is scheduled. But stay tuned in this area. But yeah, I think we've covered pretty much most of the items.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, definitely look out for those incoming things. There should be some good stuff this week.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, Langers, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you kind of walk us through all this information. And yeah, it does sound like there's lots to do between here and there, and maybe a couple of things we've got to do about just planning for Saturn 2 as Saturn 1 starts to get a little bit more finalized and has a date. So
Yeah, excellent. Yep. I'm looking forward to next year.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it should be fun to see the team there in Dev Connect, and especially Dave. We got to get Dave back on these calls and a little bit in here. I know he's kind of heads down in the background working on some stuff, but I did see a lot of posts from the community that are kind of missing him. So we got to kind of cycle the team members back in front of the community here again.
Yeah, I think I need to go away for a bit and then.
And that'll bring him forward. All right. Well, I'm going to call it off here. I don't see anybody kind of raising their hand or asking questions. So we've had the better part of an hour here. So thank you very much, Langers, for spending the time with it, and look forward to chatting with everybody in trading.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Great chatting.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.